We've obviously spent a ton of time talking about Delta, United, and American as the big three US carriers. But there's another carrier that's big and getting larger, mostly on the West Coast. Today we're here to talk about the first-class product of Alaska Airlines on one of their transcontinental routes from San Francisco to Boston, also checking out the newest of their lounges. Good early morning and welcome to San Francisco's newest terminal, the Harvey Milk Terminal 1, which first opened its doors in 2019 with the final phase being completed just a couple months ago. It plays host to a number of airlines, including Alaska Airlines, which is the second airline that has a hub here at San Francisco other than United. They do have curbside check-in available, otherwise you can head inside to the much larger check-in area. Predominantly is self-service check-in kiosks, but there are a couple agents who are there to help you if you need it. Now, Alaska Airlines, in an effort to protect the environment, has stopped issuing boarding passes unless requested. Passengers are encouraged to use their mobile devices for electronic boarding passes, so these kiosks only print your bag tags. Being a new terminal and also the tech capital of the world, security is a breeze with the newest technology, especially if you have pre-check or clear, getting through in about 2 minutes at 5:30 in the morning. With all SFO's terminals connected inside security, once you're through you can turn right to get to the international A gates or left to the domestic gates. I'm honestly not sure if they finished their decorations and shops, considering the last part of this terminal was just finished a couple months ago. Even still though, it's a nice terminal. Nice high ceilings, plenty of lighting, especially during the daytime. There's a couple things that I really like about this terminal, however. First off, being the restaurants. San Francisco's airport as a whole does a pretty good job at limiting the amount of chains. You'll find a Burger King and a Pete's Coffee, but for the most part, it's all individual brands or things that are unique to the Bay Area, and Terminal 1 showcases that beautifully. In addition, there's also some fun quirks, such as the SFO Museum. For those of you who don't know, there is a full museum in the international terminal outside security. But there's small installments here that are on a rotating basis in Terminal 1. There's actually 2 sections, so there's 2 different exhibits you can check out. And then of course, because we're in San Francisco, there has to be an Apple reseller. Honestly, the main reason that I decided to fly out of San Francisco instead of their main hub of Seattle is because San Francisco just got the newest of the Alaska lounges, opening just a couple weeks before my flight. Alaska's location at SFO has moved around a bit. They used to be in the old Terminal 1, they spent some time in the international terminal, then after acquiring Virgin America they moved to their Terminal 2 home, and then this year, once the terminal connector was finished, they moved to the new Terminal 1, positioning them to be the largest carrier in that terminal. That also called for a new lounge. Previously, they turned American's old Terminal 2 Admirals Club into their space, which worked out with One World partner privileges. But this new move meant they wanted a lounge space closer to their gates, and a space that could be theirs from scratch. This new lounge has all kinds of space for every type of traveler and all times of the day. They have a more quiet corner near the entrance where people were lounging on the Shea lounges or working in the booths, or even taking a phone call in the private booth. These people also have their own coffee and tea station apart from the main buffet. The lounge opens at 5 a.m., which is an hour earlier than their old location, and I would bet that these chairs near the window make a great spot to catch up on some sleep if you get here early enough, or if you have a long layover. For people that need to be around more people, there's also a counter with outlets to get work done that's directly inside the entrance. But just past that, we begin getting towards the dining areas. For starters, there's these small 2-person booths, which are great for couples who are getting a quick bite to eat. They're right inside the entrance, sandwiched between that and the buffet. A little further down, the next section has larger booths, in case your traveling party is bigger than 2. Then the last section of seating across from the buffet has traditional tables and more counter space with outlets. Speaking of that buffet, it is separated into a few sections. The first section from the entrance is the cafe. There's a barista operating there to serve up a number of handcrafted beverages, different coffee styles, different milk and flavor options, different teas and chocolates. Basically Alaska's own coffee shop, which I might say is very on brand. After that is the food. They had the breakfast buffet out, considering it was still 6 a.m., which is typically where airlines and lounges lack character. Alaska does match the classic American-style breakfast that so many other carriers use, although maybe with a couple healthier options. No Alaska lounge is complete, however, without their famous pancakes. I'm not even exaggerating. The brand Popcake gave Alaska free machines in exchange for only purchasing the popcake batter, meaning that you can go to Alaska's lounges around the country and find these same machines that cook you up 2 pancakes, freshly made, in a matter of seconds with the push of a button. Then the last section of the buffet is the drink options. They have self-serve coffee machines and tea, juices, and soft drinks, so basically whatever you'd like to go with your meal. I'm not gonna lie, I thought the lounge ended here, but as I reached the corner, I realized the lounge actually continued around the corner, where we first see more of those 2-person booths, but with a fun bridge-themed art behind it, symbolizing the San Francisco location. That is across from even more counter space along the windows, as it's the best use of that space while still leaving a wide enough walkway. If you continue, the seating along the window gets a bit more cozy with these 2-seat setups with tables in between. But that's also the last little nook of the lounge, the bar. Obviously empty at 6 in the morning, this bar is a great space to hang out and watch a game on TV, or get some work done in these booths around the border of the last section if you enjoy working around people. Honestly, since it is the last room in the lounge, less people make the hike back here, and so even in the more crowded times of the day, it's not horrible at least. Honestly, I do think this is an excellent space. Since their old lounge was borrowed space from American, who doesn't even have a hub here, it was a bit small for what they had become at SFO. This new space adds 55% more seating and also a much better diversity in the seating areas and entertainment. Sure, it doesn't have showers, and I'm sure people will still prefer lounges like Delta One or Polaris in the US, but remember, Alaska's roots don't leave North America. All things considered, I'm a big fan of this lounge, and when traveling one world out of SFO, I'd definitely look to come back here. Lastly, lounge access is a touchy subject. Most carriers have lounge overcrowding and have been restricting access more and more. With no long-haul routes, Alaska wasn't able to limit access like United or Delta was in their flagship spaces. That doesn't mean Alaska doesn't have premium routes, however. Essentially, any first-class passengers on routes over 2,000 miles get access, and first class under 2,000 miles can purchase access for $30. Also, anyone can purchase a day pass for $60, so it's just half off for first-class passengers. You can buy a membership where they sell $550 passes for the year to Alaska lounges, or $650 for partner lounges as well. Their elite members can get $100 off those passes, but their highest level, MVP 100K, can get free annual passes. Their 2 highest status levels also get 4 day passes per year to use for them or people traveling with them. With lounges in San Francisco, Seattle, Anchorage, Portland, Los Angeles, and New York, you're almost guaranteed to have a lounge on the majority of Alaska's flights. Finally, it was time to head out to our gate where we were enjoying this morning's sunrise over the San Francisco Bay Area. We also walked past the American Airlines Admirals Club being the second One World lounge in Terminal 1 alone here at SFO, on top of all the stuff in the international terminal. Finally, we reached gates B15 and 16 to Washington National and Boston. B16 is going to be ours today, and our aircraft was already sitting out there, the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9, one of their new flagship aircraft of sorts. Alaska's livery is one of the more unique liveries in the world, at least in my opinion. Sure, it's not striped like Condor or chrome like the old American Airlines, but not many airlines have a mascot as their main logo. The smiling face on the vertical stabilizer of Alaska's planes is amongst the most recognizable faces in the industry, along with Hawaiian's Pualani maybe. In the 1970s, once officially becoming Alaska Airlines, they had to choose a logo. The choices were between a totem pole, which is common in Alaska's panhandle, a gold miner for the raging gold rush out west and in Alaska, Russian spires in remembrance of Alaska's Russian heritage, and the one they finally landed on, a smiling Inuk man in a traditional hooded parka representing the resilient indigenous people of Alaska. While the identity of the man is still unknown, that hasn't stopped the theories about it. We just know that there's some sort of smiling Inuk man, one of the native tribes in and near Alaska, which spoiled the wild theories about it being possibly Jimi Hendrix, Abraham Lincoln, or even Bob Marley. The public has basically narrowed it down to 2 people, Oliver Emoak, which I'm probably mispronouncing, I'm sorry, but who was an Inupiat who worked for Alaska as a traveling show, or Chester Sevek, who used to welcome Alaska passengers and taught them local traditions. Alaska still claims the image isn't based on anyone in particular, but instead just symbolized Alaska's native populations. That's enough about the outside of the airplane, let's check out the inside of the airplane. Alaska Airlines uses the somewhat familiar domestic first-class setup here in the United States, using a 2-2 couch-style seating. Basically, a little bit wider and a little bit more legroom than you'd get in the normal economy. I get it's not quite as flashy as the lie-flat seats that you'll find on a lot of transcontinental routes, but it sure beats European business class in my opinion. The seats, obviously being plenty wide, also have a 6-way adjustable headrest, meaning it goes up, down, it tilts forward and backwards, and curls at the edges. There's a wide armrest between the two seats, so that you don't have to fight over who gets the space. Each one also comes with a little bit of extra counter space and a cup holder. The inside of that, however, also has a little storage pocket. Not huge, but enough to store your chargers and reading material for the flight. You'll also find the button to recline the seat. And obviously, in one of these domestic first-class seats, you hope you can get a good amount of sleep. So testing out the recline here, you can see that, unfortunately, it's not the best recline in the world. It is helped by having a footrest, but honestly, I've seen better. The front of that center console also houses a USB and universal charging port. In front of you, on the seat back, you'll notice there is no TV, as all of Alaska's entertainment is on your personal device, instead having just the normal seatback literature. Below that is basically 2 pockets, and since the literature is kept up above, you get full use of these pockets down below. Basically just 1 pocket separated into 2 compartments. Below that is the footrest that I was mentioning earlier. You'll see that there is enough legroom here. You also have the space between the seats to store your bag. That allows you to use the leg rest in front of you to maximize the legroom if you are looking to sleep on the flight. It does go all the way down, or there's an intermediate click halfway. Along the window you'll find another armrest, this one however housing the tray table, which folds out either halfway or all the way. It does also have a device holder so that you can prop up your iPad or phone if you're watching some sort of entertainment while you eat your meal. Lastly, because it's a narrow-body airplane, overhead individual air vents are still the norm. Can't be said for every airplane out there. I do have to say, however, that I am going to miss these old bulkheads you can see on the 737-900, but not on the Maxes. Being a domestic first-class seat, we aren't expecting anything crazy for amenities. We did get a pre-departure beverage of orange juice, and my seatmate asked for a can of champagne to split between the two of us so we could each have our breakfast mimosa. What a great guy. In addition, we also got a blanket. You'll see here it's not the thickest thing in the world, but it'll be good enough to get sleep on this flight. So, Alaska Airlines, the perfect name for an airline headquartered in Seattle, right? Well, they haven't always been in Seattle. They actually began in the 1930s as McGee Airways in Anchorage, Alaska, with unscheduled services only operating when mail or people needed a ride to Bristol Bay. They were kept alive due to a number of mergers during the Great Depression, since Anchorage was oversaturated with small carriers. Their main venture was the merger with Star Air Service, where they and 15 aircraft supported the booming mining industry, helping the airline dominate Alaska at the time, while McGee remained to fly liquor to remote villages. Despite this success in Alaska, however, airline regulation at the time made it impossible for them to leave the state, a similar fate that Southwest was facing in Texas. For example, they tried to launch services on the coveted Fairbanks to Seattle route, but regulation gave it to Pan Am instead. They also used post-World War scraps to build their fleet and open the charter service, which brought them their first ever profits, until regulation shut that down too. With hope of reaching mainland America, the airline was bought by a New York businessman, who got them a big hangar in Anchorage and finally won the rights to the Alaska Airlines name in 1944. In 1948, in order to create routes outside of Alaska, the headquarters was moved to Payne Field in Seattle, and 2 years later, deregulation allowed major airline growth, largely unrestricted. Before deregulation, they had 10 Alaskan destinations in their new certification for Seattle. After deregulation, they reached 12 U.S. mainland destinations on the western part of the country. They drew in new customers with gimmicky ads, onboard saloons, pianos, and the first in-flight movies. They also found major success in the Combi aircraft, or essentially half cargo, half seats, for transporting everything that needed to get to and from Alaska, starting with their flagship 727s. Despite deregulation, they really struggled against US's major carriers on the mainland to Alaska routes, especially with Northwest, who was sending their wide bodies to Alaska. So Alaska offloaded their intra-Alaska routes to a regional carrier and focused on the US mainland and Japan in the 60s, later acquiring Horizon Air and making it their own regional carrier. They actually served Siberia in the 70s, and the unofficial rumors is that Alaska and the Soviets had secret negotiations and the State Department looked the other way to avoid negative reaction from the Soviets. They found that these planes used to the US mainland were underutilized in the winter in Alaska, however, so they decided to launch Mexico flights to keep the planes flying in the 80s, and in the 90s they were able to celebrate 20 years of profits since the deregulation. This also came with a number of customer service awards, which they continue receiving to this day. With 737 NGs in the early 2000s, they were finally able to reach further east, with services like Anchorage to Chicago and Seattle to DC. This also allowed them to drop their last MD-80s and become, as they say, proudly all Boeing, which I guess makes sense when you're based in Seattle. More recently, they found success in their Hawaii markets and growing California networks, in addition to joining the One World Alliance, making it the only alliance with 2 US carriers. The only thing we haven't discussed is their successful attempt at mergers and growth in the last 10 or so years, but we're going to save that for some other time. Alaska's entertainment system is a bit odd, or I guess I should say that it's not my favorite. As mentioned previously, there isn't any seatback TVs, instead you can connect to their in-flight Wi-Fi system. You can connect to the messaging services like WhatsApp and iMessage for free, as well as the entertainment. Or for $8, you can purchase full flight Wi-Fi. I do hope that they're moving towards free Wi-Fi like a lot of other carriers, but it still ain't bad compared to some other carriers. The Wi-Fi isn't the best, but for an airline internet connection, I'll take it. At least I could get some work done and browse Instagram, which, by the way, go follow me there at Patrick Flies Planes, down in the description as well. The entertainment portal is on the same page as the Wi-Fi, just a different option in the menu. They have it sorted by TV and movies, and there's a fairly good selection of movies given their routes. Remember, their average flight length is around 2 to 3 hours, so people don't need endless options like on long-haul flights. Given that, there is enough movies to keep you occupied. I just wish there was some more TV shows or even full seasons, which is great when you're nearing the end of a flight and don't have time for a full movie. I do appreciate the special episodes on the San Francisco Giants as a lifelong fan, something they took over from Virgin America after the merger. Alaska doesn't have menus on their flights since there's only ever one meal. The flight attendants came by prior to departure to give us the options. Alaska does, however, offer a pre-order for first-class customers, or you can choose from what's left once on board. I do have to say that I'm a bit bummed to be going to Boston and not New York, since, just after booking, Alaska announced a partnership to improve their dining experience, specifically on the San Francisco to New York JFK route. One of the US's most premium routes, and Alaska lacks the lie-flat seats and glamour that other carriers have on these routes, so dining can go a long way. Chef Ju, a Cantonese Michelin star chef from San Francisco, has designed onboard meals for that route only for now. The plan is to start them on August 28th and run for a year, making seasonal adjustments, but including things like congee, black cod, and duck. Really sounds like the dream, but not for us today, unfortunately. We were given a couple breakfast options, considering the 7 a.m. departure, and I decided on the eggs and potatoes. The single tray breakfast service is fairly common on all airlines and included scrambled eggs with chives, bacon, and potatoes. There was a berry yogurt that was pressurized to all hell and a fruit cup. The bread, however, was a pleasant surprise. It was a cinnamon sugar bread, which made for a little nice dessert at the end of the meal. This went with the Alaska branded silverware and the green tea, which was great since I had completely lost my voice the day before. I wasn't planning on sleeping on this flight, given that it was a 7 a.m. departure, so I had just gotten a full night's rest, and it was an all-day flight, which is good considering I wasn't a huge fan of the recline or the blanket available. Instead, I spent the time looking out the window and getting work done as we passed by cities like Milwaukee and Detroit. I did check out the lavatory, however. It is a narrow body, but specifically the 737 MAX bathrooms I find to be a little bit tight. Perhaps the funniest thing to me is that the lavatory sinks always seem like they were forgotten until the last moment, just kind of carved into the wall like a little outlet. Now, obviously, San Francisco to Boston, even though it stays within the continental US, is no short flight, being about 6 hours, so the one meal isn't quite enough for everyone. They do, however, have a snack basket available in the front galley that you can walk up and grab stuff from when you get peckish. They also came through the aisles to hand stuff out to those of us who were awake. I chose to go with a Kind bar and one of the strangest bags of chips with a mix of salt and vinegar, barbecue, and garlic. Alaska has largely been plagued by playing head-to-head with the big guys, so to say. They originally struggled to leave Alaska because of competition from Northwest, Pan Am, Pacific Northwest, and just the regulation. Then they struggled to get major growth past Seattle and Portland hubs. Even still, they face a similar challenge as JetBlue, being semi-regional to the West Coast. They have, however, used mergers, always, but especially more recently, to grow in their own way. The US West Coast has a ton of flying. You'll find flights every hour on multiple airlines between cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Seattle. Alaska had their roots solidly in Seattle, but struggled to get south of that besides their Portland hub. That was until they set their eyes on Virgin America. Virgin America was a wildly successful airline based in San Francisco as part of the Virgin Group. They reached profits much faster than average with a cult-like following, and even went public on NASDAQ sooner than typical. The problem being the investors seemed to want more, forcing them to look into a sale of the not even 10-year-old airline. At first, it looked like JetBlue would be the buyer, which made sense since Virgin had the West Coast, JetBlue had the East Coast. Both airlines offered similar in-flight products and had similar followings. This would create a true coast-to-coast airline to compete with the major carriers. Then, Alaska put their bid in. Alaska viewed the acquisition of Virgin America as a way to make them the king of the West Coast, specifically adding a hub in California and more California routes. Despite these two dueling offers, Richard Branson still strongly opposed a sale. He loved Virgin America and had visions for its growth still. Shareholders didn't agree, however. They took the Alaska deal, simply because it would make them more money, and in 2018 the last Virgin flight was completed, with the last plane painted into Alaska's livery a year later, and all the Airbuses were sold or scrapped shortly after, proving that Alaska wanted to keep doing their thing, they just needed the routes and less competition in those markets. Virgin's cult-like following did not approve of Alaska. Their main hub of San Francisco became an Alaska hub and people split. Some stayed for convenience, some left for United. That's not their only merger success recently, however. As mentioned previously, Alaska found success in the Hawaii flights, some from them and some acquired from Virgin. In 2019, however, Southwest announced their flights to Hawaii, putting some big pressure on Alaska, but even more pressure on Hawaiian Airlines, who was losing grasp of their flagship routes and looking at merger possibilities. Alaska offered them $1.9 billion on top of assuming their $900 million of debt. With nothing official yet, we do have some proposed ideas. First off, it sounds like Alaska and Hawaiian will remain separate brands under the Alaska Air Group, since each has their own significant recognition. This also helps because Hawaiian has some long-haul wide-body aircraft, and Alaska has only the short to medium-haul narrow-body aircraft. This merger would really thrive in their connections, using Alaska's domestic route map to their West Coast hubs, then connecting onto Hawaii, something the 3 major US carriers are already doing at the moment. This would also make us assume that Hawaiian flights would operate under oneworld, which is fun since they aren't currently in any alliance. The concern most people had is that the US Department of Transportation has been preventing airline consolidation in the last 5-ish years to keep things competitive, with concerns over monopolies on certain routes. The merger would give Alaska over 50% market share on Hawaii flights, which they do try to avoid whenever possible. As a matter of fact, the JetBlue-Spirit merger failed earlier this year for similar reasons. At the time of this flight, the DOT had extended their review period for the Alaska-Hawaiian merger. But as of roughly 10 days ago, the proposal passed the review, meaning the two airlines can move forward with the merger. Mergers and acquisitions are messy, but for us general population, we just stand by and wait for the official news from the airlines. Welcome to Boston, where we can now talk about the complete Alaska Airlines experience on one of their longer routes in their premium product. Obviously, I have my reservations on the seat. Airlines like United and JetBlue, for example, offer lie-flat seats on the same route, which brings those seeking a bit more relaxed environment on board. That being said, Alaska does have the service aspect under control. Their staff is some of the best in the game, and it's one of the reasons why they don't currently have the same closed-door, lie-flat seat concepts as the others. There's definitely more to be said on that, but I do have a video coming out shortly on their longest flight in the network where we'll put a deeper look into that, as well as input from a former Virgin and Alaska cabin crew on the whole premium cabin experience concept. I will say that while the one-tray service gets flack, it's fairly normal for breakfast, and I still feel that Alaska puts together a better-than-average meal for us, even if it wasn't the Michelin-level meal from the New York flights. As for the lounge, I feel like we've kind of said everything that needs to be said on it already. I think that's their best lounge in the network, allowing for more passengers and more variety of relaxation before your flight. I actually have a Japan Airlines flight out of SFO soon and will probably choose to use the Alaska Lounge over the Japan Airlines Lounge simply because of the much more cozy feel, even if it doesn't have the same long-haul amenities that people want in a lounge. In a world where premium cabins are king, everyone has to put their best product out there. I mean, even Spirit Airlines has a first-class product on board. I just hope Alaska's allegiance to the 2-2 domestic first-class style doesn't come back to bite them, as airlines like JetBlue and American roll out the newest version of their transcontinental business class products with closing doors and lie-flat seats. When it comes down to it, however, airlines value loyalty, and Alaska's travelers are some of the more loyal people out there. Sure, there's the bad apples of the bunch, but if you ask the average Seattleite or San Franciscan on their thoughts on Alaska Airlines, you'll be more likely to get positive reviews than negative. Unless you find a bitter ex-Virgin America fan, cough cough, like me, which is rare in this industry. They know what their strengths are in marketing and customer interactions, and they really do excel in those categories. I'll let y'all be the judges though. What do you think about their first-class product? Would you consider them on your next flight in the US? Let me know down below, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.